we already talked about Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about Sanders and Penny, but basically every quote unquote gross running back, the guys that Twitter doesn't like, basically, they had a day in week 4. CH continued a strong season. Miles Sanders had like a pretty strong season to open, but he like really kicked it into high gear this week. Josh Jacobs and Rashad Penny were not doing much, but boy, did they ever do a lot in this one. They jumped off with, I believe, 30-point weeks each. Dameon Pierce also has a big breakout game. Which stood out to you as the most sustainable?
Well, I think that the easy answer is the one that I was picking in the preseason, which is Miles Sanders.
And why do you think that's the most sustainable?
Because Miles Sanders has a history of being a bell cow. Like it's not new. We're not betting on something that's never happened before. We're betting on something that happened and then it happened again. And then he got hurt. And then when he came back, it didn't happen anymore. We saw an injury affect the way that he was used. We saw the injury. Like it's a clear line. If you look at last year's game logs, it is a clear line. He was a bell cow, boom, injured. And then just like huge committee the rest of the year. And now we are back to bell cow. The guy's a bell cow. He's going to get a ton of opportunity. He doesn't get as many targets as I would love. He's not going to be a 20 plus points per game player, but he could easily be a Nick Chubb or better for a lot less. And that's pretty exciting.
Here's why it's not Miles Sanders. Of all these running backs, Miles Sanders was like the only running back who didn't actually get a role change. It looks like he got a role change. Week 1 to 3 average snaps, 54, plays 67 this week. Week 1 to 3 average routes, 43, plays 53 this week. Carries, 51, that's 57% this week. Targets, 7, 13 this week. It looks like he got a much bigger role. I don't think he actually got a bigger role. Maybe somewhat more carries because Boston Scott was out and they liked Boston Scott more than Trey Sermon. But other than that, if we look situationally, he was already dominating all the early downs, right? Which is a positive. Like his role was better than what was feared in the preseason. If he had this role that he has, and people knew he would have that role in the preseason, he wouldn't be like the third running back on some of my 0 RB teams in round 10. Like he would have been going in like round 4 or round 5. But he wasn't playing any of the 2-minute drill snaps. He wasn't playing any of the long down or distance snaps. And he was ceding snaps to Kenny Gainwell and trail script. This game just existed in more of the situations that Miles Sanders plays in. When they run the ball, they clearly want Miles Sanders to be their back. He is their clear lead rusher. That is not in dispute. And in this game, the Eagles, who have been generally roughly neutral to slightly above neutral in pass rate and neutral game script, pass rate over expectation, this game, they went way the other way. They went minus 16% pass rate over expectation, 16% under expectation. Maybe had something to do with the torrential downpour that was happening the entire game in Philadelphia, if I had to guess. And so I think with this game is they looked at it and said, look, this weather is ridiculous. We're now ahead in the second half. We're not going to mess around. We're just going to pound the ball with Miles Sanders. Or we're just going to pound the ball, period. And if we're going to pound the ball, we're going to do it with the guy that we want to pound the rock with, and that's Miles Sanders. And so he ends up getting more snaps across the board. But we didn't really see a role change. I think that this week showed the ceiling of what his role is, which is a really decent ceiling, a higher ceiling than potentially we thought that he would have. But I don't think that he's like a top 12 running back. I think that he's still a mid-range RB2 who's going to have spike weeks.
So interestingly enough, he had a 69.2 opportunity share heading into week 4. And then he had, oh wait, did they already update it? Maybe they've already updated. Maybe he has a 69.2% opportunity share right now. I thought it was going into the week, and then he had like a 85 or something, because this week most of the opportunities were skewed to rush, which is where he gets most of his opportunities. So yeah, like I don't know, he has a very high opportunity share. And when you have a very high opportunity share, you're on the field more often, which means that you're going to have a pretty reasonable chance to score a lot of fantasy points. He's not going to score 20 plus fantasy points because his target share is tiny. He's only got a 7.6% target share. He's basically Rashad Penny, but on a good team.
Here's the guy who actually got a role change and who honestly might be a top 12 running back rest of the season. And it pains me because I like have hated this player basically his whole career. And I hate his stands on Twitter. They infuriate me, particularly one of them.
I've never seen a Josh Jacobs stand on Twitter. Never.
Yeah, famously, nobody's named after Josh Jacobs. But look, I gotta give it up to the guy Josh Jacobs. You want to talk about opportunity share? Josh Jacobs this week had an 89% snap share. 89% snap share. They had 75 total snaps. He played 67 of them. That is otherworldly high. That is like Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey level high. He runs 72% of the routes. That's unfathomably elite. He ends up seeing 20%, or he ends up seeing 80% of the carries, 20% of the targets. Total bell cow roll. I think partially this is a little bit noise. Raiders had 75 plays, incredibly only 9 third downs. That's just not usually how it works. If you have 75 plays, you usually have more than 9 third downs. Brandon Bolden still played 5 of the 9 third downs. I'm not sure of how many other third downs were short yardage third downs, which Jacobs normally plays. That being said, there was some legitimate switches. In week 1, when Bolden was active, Jacobs played 0% of snaps the 2-minute drill. It all went to Bolden. Some of it went to Abdullah, mostly Bolden. Week 2 and 3, Bolden's out. Jacobs plays a little under 50% of the 2-minute drill. He splits it roughly 50-50 with Amir Abdullah. Week 4, Bolden is back. Abdullah's there. Jacobs plays the entire 2-minute drill in that game. That's a legitimate new role. And despite getting all of these carries, they were like, no, let's just keep piling up Jacobs. Let's not work in Bolden. Let's not work in Abdullah. Let's not even work in Zamir White, the new rookie, right? Zamir White converts a 3rd and 1. That's like a 25-yard run all the way down inside the 10-yard line. Immediately, they sub him out. They get Josh Jacobs back in to punch in the touchdown. So Jacobs, I think, benefited from some game script, from some noisiness to put up this massive numbers. But there were also ways that they could have compensated for that. They decided not to. They decided to give him 67 snaps as a running back. They decided to give him a zillion touches. So I think that we are looking at an actual bell cow in Josh Jacobs. He's probably not going to have 30 fantasy points every week, but I do think it's entirely reasonable that he could have like 17, 18 points per game the rest of the season.
Well, what's interesting about that is that I didn't realize this. Josh Jacobs is currently sitting on an 84% opportunity share as well, which is number 3 in the NFL. So I'm going to go ahead and change my answer to Josh Jacobs because I did not realize it was that high. He had a lot more receiving and just kind of assumed it was a one-off game, but that opportunity share is insane.
Yeah, he had sort of a quietly good role, I would say, for the first portion of the year. Like, he basically, everybody thought he was going to be seeding early downs, some early downs to Zamir White, and then he wasn't going to get any passing downs. And it was kind of like half true. Like he was seeding all the passing downs to Bolden and Abdullah, but White was getting nothing. And so he was kind of having like a last year Antonio Gibson type role. And then it's evolved where he's like now also getting most of the passing downs and he's getting all the rushing downs. And so then it's basically just like you get all the touches type role, which is like a really good type role. So it's pretty astounding. I don't know if this necessarily sticks, but it's also like there's no reason to think it can't stick. Like Brandon Bolden sucks, Amir Abdullah sucks, Zamir White, who knows, but we both didn't like him as a prospect. I don't think Josh Jacobs is a great talent, but like I think it's pretty obvious that he's by far the best talent on their roster. And if they want to deploy the best talent on their roster on 80% of the opportunities and snaps, like who am I to begrudge them?
Yeah, okay. I'm going back and forth here. Josh Jacobs still only had a 9.7% target share on the season. Miles Sanders has 7.6%. They're very similar roles actually, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, but Jacobs he plays in more situations. Like Sanders is capped out of more situations than Josh Jacobs is.
Yeah. But like I think that the reason we're seeing the greater raw touches is probably has more to do with the Raiders running a lot more plays than the Eagles or something. Because that's not a very big difference in target share. It's like 2 percentage points. That's basically nothing. But yet it's
they've had a lot more pass
3.5 targets.
They've had a lot more pass attempts than the Eagles.
Yeah. And there was somebody on this very program very recently telling me that the Eagles were only not passing because they were just blowing teams out.
Which is true.
So we'll see.
And then they played in a downpour. So,
Yeah. We'll see. So if that's true, then it would be reasonable to suggest that Miles Sanders' passing usage, raw usage, will go up.
Well, but it won't. That's the difference because Jacobs actually is out there when they're passing, but when the Eagles are passing, it's Gainwell.
And yet it's still 7.6 to 9.7. They're basically the same. And I'm just going to say this. Miles Sanders has home run potential and Josh Jacobs has 10-yard potential. So, like, I don't know. It's close. Probably Jacobs, but
I'll give you the last part, but it's Josh Jacobs, which like makes me sick. Do you think I want to be making the case for Josh Jacobs?
Hey, look, anytime that you can get behind an unathletic, useless running back, I know that you can't wait to do it. So
that's how much people should be excited about Josh Jacobs. I'm excited about Josh Jacobs.
Oh my god. No, I think I had actually just made an argument in the Discord, I think on Monday, about Nick Chubb versus Josh Jacobs versus David Montgomery and how they all score basically the same amount of points, but Nick Chubb is a Ferrari price. And you should actually just probably have Josh Jacobs or David Montgomery instead. And Miles Sanders is right in that same ballpark usually, or maybe not usually, but has been in that 14 to 16 point ballpark. So
well, like, now he will be because they've allowed him to score touchdowns again, which they had
a core 3 touchdowns this year. The dude's on fire. He had 0 last year. He's got 3 in 4 games. He's like Nick Chubb light.
Nick Chubb light.